Welcome to the Healthy Youth Ministry Podcast. HYM exists to encourage, equip, and empower youth pastors and next-gen leaders. Our heart is to develop healthy youth pastors and leaders who are equipped to pioneer and lead healthy youth ministries. To help our community continue to grow, it would mean the world to us if you shared this content with any youth pastors or leaders in your sphere of influence. Or take just 60 seconds to leave a review or rating, which will help increase our reach and impact around the world. Lastly, we would be honored to host you and your team in our national conference on October 14th and 15th in South Dallas at Oaks Church. Again, that's HYMconference.com. Now, it's time to grow. Let's do it. Let's get stronger together.
What is your target and how is your aim? We're continuing our conversation on hitting the target on this episode of the Healthy Youth Ministry Podcast. We know it, when the leader is healthy, the ministry is healthy. These questions we asked on our first episode of this series: what is your target? How is your aim? The target is your objective, your goal to reach more students, develop more leaders, start a new ministry initiative like launching Jesus clubs or a small group. What are those tools, those principles, those practices when it comes to hitting your goal? We talked about this on our previous episode. We'll probably dedicate another episode completely to goal setting, but I just want to remind you that God has called us. We have a goal to reach more people, develop more leaders, equip the saints to do the work in the ministry. And what I've learned over the last few decades of working in next-gen ministry, a leader or ministry that hits the target is typically a leader or ministry that has a goal, but also has great aim to accomplish that goal. This is our second part about our aim in this 3-part series we're calling Hitting the Target. We'll be breaking down this word aim. Last month we talked about anticipatory leadership, and in this episode we're going to be talking about intentional living, and then we'll wrap up this 3-part series talking about missional mobilization. I strongly feel with the right aim, you can hit your target. And I've experienced this firsthand, not just with the ministries that I've had the opportunity to lead with some great team members, but also with a lot of the churches that we are coaching and consulting. When you have the right aim, you're gonna hit the target. So on this episode, we're talking about intentional living. We could rename it intentional leadership, but I wanted to talk about intentional living because your intentionality in all areas of your life is really what's going to impact you hitting that target when it comes to your aim. So we talked about in our last episode about what anticipatory leadership looks like and how we anticipate and we map out our calendar. But what's it look like to have intentional living, that we're living with an intentionality? You know, the word intentional simply is defined as done on purpose, deliberate. Your students and leaders are a product of your program or pathway. With everything you're doing, do you have an intentional pathway for your students and your leaders? So Paul talks about this when he's writing to the church of Ephesus. He says this in Ephesians 5:15 through 17. He says, so be careful. This is the NLT. He says, be careful how you live. Don't live like fools, but like those who are wise. And this is the key portion of the verse that you kind of zoom into. Make the most of every opportunity in these evil days. We all know we are living in evil days. And he says this: don't act thoughtlessly, as he's writing to the church of Ephesus. He's writing to you and I, church leader today. But understand what the Lord wants you to do. I love this other translation. It says this: take advantage of every day as you spend your life for his purposes. Make the most of every opportunity. Paul's saying, hey, be intentional with your life. So let's talk about it. I want to talk to you today and give you a few areas that we need to be a little more intentional in, or maybe some areas for you to emphasize when it comes to your intentionality. 10 areas, okay, I'm going to have to go rapid fire, but 10 areas of intentionality in youth ministry. And again, there could be 20, there could be 25, there could probably be 100. So I narrowed this list down the best I could. And there's going to be a couple that I'll share with you and then let you know, hey, that's actually going to be more zoomed into on a later episode. So the first area of intentionality, and there's no specific order, but when it comes to hitting the target, I have to have anticipatory leadership with my aim. You know, and it's like to pull that bow back and to look at the target. You know, I have to have intentional leadership, intentional living. What areas of intentionality am I living in to hit that target? And this is what I have seen to be true. The first one is this: be intentional in your presence. Be intentional in your presence. Be present as you can when it comes to on Sundays at your church, or on Wednesdays or Mondays, whenever you have a church event. Be present. Be present at school events. Your presence should be felt by students. I love what 1 Thessalonians 2:8 says. We loved you so much that we shared with you not only God's good news, but our lives too. Man, are you being present in the life of students? In our last Stronger Together episode, we talked about Jesus clubs and campus ministry, and something I've always said is shepherds smell like sheep. So to smell like sheep means you have to be intentional with your presence, being at that school, being at that pep rally, being at that lunch, being at that school assembly, being at that concert, being at that play. Like, be intentional with your presence. Early on, it was, something as a young youth pastor, I would map out my week and map it out with intentionality in my presence. Where am I spending my time? Am I going to be at this football game? Am I going to be at this volleyball game? I'm going to be grabbing breakfast with this student. How intentional. If you really want to hit the target, it's going to take your presence. Understanding that being intentional with that presence is huge. If being present isn't on your calendar, guess what? You're not going to be present. I love, and I quote it all the time, Michael Hyatt says, what gets on the calendar gets done. So when you're looking at your calendar, where are those moments of intentionality? But also know that interruptions are some of your greatest opportunity for ministry. But you have to be in the crowd. I love the moment with Jesus walking through the crowd and the woman with the issue of blood touching him, and he's like, who touched me? He understood in that moment there was something happened. That interruption was an opportunity for impartation. My prayer is, as youth leaders and next gen leaders, Lord, give us more interruptions. So you need to be intentional in your presence. Number 2, be intentional with parents. Again, a whole nother conversation to really zoom into, but how you communicate with parents, interact with parents, respond to parents must be intentional. Parents are the gatekeepers to students and your greatest partner. So be intentional with parents. For some of you that might not be a parent, who are some of the parents on your team that's helping you be more effective in communicating and partnering with parents? There's some great resources out there. Axis.org, axis.org, axis.org. Great resource when it comes to helping with parents. Another one is feed.bible. We always talk about feed.bible because they have so many great resources when it comes to biblical literacy, but also connecting the parents and some of the hard topics that students are facing today. Another one is bark.us, which is a great opportunity to talk about, what it looks like with your students' phones and all those things. Listen, parents They want help. They want someone to partner with them. Are you being intentional with parents? So being intentional with your presence, being intentional with parents. You're about to see, because I love alliteration, all these start with P. Come on, somebody. If you're listening, if you're watching, and you know who we are as a community, you know we love alliteration. Number 3, be intentional in your preparation. Every meeting, every conversation, small group or sermon, be intentional in your preparation. Create margins so that you can be prepared. Are you prepared for something new? Are you prepared for growth? Don't wait, anticipate. We talked about anticipatory leadership on our last episode when it comes to hitting the target. So, be intentional in your preparation. Embrace the season you're in. When preparation meets opportunity, destiny's released. Are you being intentional in your preparation when it comes to your pathways or your programming? Just to go through a list. Are you being intentional with first-time guests when students say yes to Jesus, helping students take next steps with water baptism, when it comes to small groups, when it comes to camps and retreats and creating off-ramps for them, when it comes to missions, when it comes to giving initiatives with your students, when it comes to student leadership, when it comes to adult leadership, when it comes to Sunday Serve? Are you being intentional in your preparation? Years ago, I defined youth ministry as this: I'm just a facilitator of opportunities. But to do that, I have to put in the work to create the opportunities for students to say yes to Jesus, for students to go on a mission trip, for leaders to walk in their purpose. Are you being intentional in your preparation? Number 4, be intentional in what you're preaching. We could have a whole conversation on communication, and we probably will, but I just want to remind you, it's a sacred trust. Preach the Bible. Let your orthodoxy be stronger than your outreach. Be intentional in your preaching. Again, we're going to zoom into that subject at another time and talk about sermon series and creative communication and all that stuff. But I just want to remind you, to hit the target, you got to be intentional. You just can't be, hey, what are we talking about this week? Where are you bringing students? What journey are you bringing them on? Number 5, be intentional with posting on social media. Understand that social media is the language of this generation, so make sure you're telling the stories by posting. Say it like this: publish what Jesus is doing. Be intentional. What's your intentionality with your personal social media, with your ministry social media? Are you being intentional with that? Not for algorithm's sake, but for really connecting to your community and the people they're following. Number 6, and this one's pretty important. Again, there is no correct order in these areas of intentionality when it comes to intentional living, but be intentional with how you pray. Be intentional with how you pray. Be intentional with your prayers. Pray big, bold prayers. And remember, your greatest tool for maximum kingdom impact is always and will be prayer. Philippians 4:6, don't worry about anything, instead pray about everything. Do you have a moment that you pray with leaders? Do you have a moment that students are coming together and praying together? Do you have moments that you're fasting and praying? It's so imperative that you're intentional in how you pray. Leading up to a big event, we're going to have 3 nights of prayer. We're going to have these different moments of prayer. I could talk to you about prayer ministry and youth ministry for hours, because it has been I can't even say secret sauce. We lived and built our youth ministries on prayer. Years ago, early on in youth ministry, we used to do a thing called Tuesday Lift. Every Tuesday morning at 6:30, students would come and pray. We called it lift because in James it says, humble yourself before the Lord and he'll lift you up. And one of the most humble things a student can do is wake up early. So we did Tuesday morning lift. We did prayer on before service. As someone that has started building a staff and had more staff members, we would fast and pray on Mondays or fast and pray on Wednesdays. Are you being intentional with how you pray? I'll give you 2 quotes, 2 of my favorites. Mark Batterson says, who you become is determined by how you pray. That takes intentionality. E.M. Bounds says this, he who does not plow in his prayer closet will never reap in his pulpit. Are you being intentional with how you pray? What about this? Are you being intentional with how you play? And create a work hard, play hard culture in the ministry you're leading. Guys, this is youth ministry. Ladies, this is youth ministry. We got to have fun. And man, understand that takes intentionality. You'll be tempted to be all work, no play. But understand, community before cause. And have those things. I'm guilty as a leader that's like next hill, next hill, next hill. Let's keep going. But you have to create these moments that you play. Yeah, I even know National Community Church with Mark Batterson. They have a pray and play retreat. I'm like, how great is that? We're gonna pray together. We're gonna play, and we're gonna build some memories, build some community, so we can reach more people. And that leads to the next area of intentionality. Be intentional with your pace. Be intentional with your pace. Now, I'm just letting you know now, we're going to punt this one down the field and go deeper in it in another episode. But I did just want to remind you, I believe that the Lord will give you grace for your pace. But you still need to be intentional with your pace. We are called to finish the race, and that will take intentionality. Fight for ministry rhythms. What's the author of Hebrews says? Hebrews 4:10-11 says, "For all who have entered into God's rest have rested from their labors, just as God did after creating the world. So let us," that's all of us, "do our best to enter that rest. But if we disobey God, as the people of Israel did, we will fall." You want to know the recipe for failure? Don't rest. It's right there. So you need to create rhythms of ministry and rest. Keep the Sabbath. Again, we don't have time, but that takes intentionality. You can't have rhythms of rest by accident. That's why intentional living is so important in hitting the target and having the right aim. I need to anticipate, but I need to live a life of intentionality, and that comes to being intentional in my pace. Number 9, be intentional in passing the baton. You're going to hear us talk about this from time to time. It's ultimately going, who's next? Who are you raising up? Who are you releasing out? If you check out our episode on how to multiply your influence, we did a deep dive in what that looks like. But are you being intentional? You need to be thinking, who's next? That takes intentionality. Lastly, be persistent with your intentionality. Don't give up. A big part of the heart of who we are as healthy youth ministry is coming alongside youth pastors and leaders and encouraging them. Don't give up. Keep running the race. Be persistent in your intentionality. Let's not get tired in doing good. Galatians 6:9. At the right time, you'll reap a harvest of blessing if you don't give up. And when it comes to being intentional, living life on purpose, intentional leadership over time becomes intuitive leadership. I'll say that again. Intentional leadership over time becomes intuitive leadership. Why are some leaders more intuitive than others? Because they stacked up a life of intentionality. So keep going. We are responsible for the faithful. God is responsible for the fruitful. I love the book. Give a shout out right here if you haven't read it. It's actually a great listen on audio. Atomic Habits by James Clear. He says this statement: the greatest threat to success, so let's say the greatest threat from you hitting the target, from you accomplishing the goals that God has for you, he says the greatest threat to success is boredom. And he actually talks about how Olympic athletes, which we just now had the Summer Olympics, a couple of years away from the Winter Olympics, then back again for the Summer Olympics in LA. But great athletes, he talks about how they fall in love with the process. They're not afraid of boredom. The greatest threat to success is boredom. So my challenge to you as you're working to do everything you can to reach more students, develop more leaders, is don't get bored with holiness. Don't get bored with purity. Don't get bored with honor. Don't get bored with prayer. Don't get bored with reaching the lost. Don't get bored with being faithful. Don't get bored with being intentional. It's the small things that make the biggest impact. We need a church. We need a group of leaders that will commit to long obedience in the same direction. Be intentional. Are you living your week out on purpose? I didn't even have time to talk to you today. And again, I know I keep talking about other episodes because we don't want to just put all of our content in one episode, but be intentional with your family, being intentional with your spouse. There's so many layers there, but what's it look like for you to be more intentional? And I'm telling you, when you're more intentional, it's going to help you aim. You can hit that bullseye, accomplish those goals that God has set out before you. So don't give up on that student. Don't give up on that intern. Don't give up on that parent or that leader. Don't give up on your God assignment. Keep being intentional. Keep looking for that right aim, anticipatory leadership, intentional living. And we're going to be jumping in at our next episode, part 3, on what it looks like for missional mobilization. We're going to do that in our next episode. But before then, we'll have another Stronger Together episode and continuing some conversations on how to reach our schools and impact our communities. So don't forget, we are stronger together. So refuse to do life and ministry alone. And one great opportunity that you have to come together at a meeting place is at Healthy Youth Ministry Conference. Our national conference is October 14th and 15th. You always hear about it in our intro and outro on our podcast, but check out HYMconference.com. We would love for you to join us. We have some incredible speakers, but more than anything, we get to do community together. So refuse to do life alone, because we're stronger together. Let's go.
Thank you for listening to the Healthy Youth Ministry podcast. And thank you for investing in your leadership, because the next generation needs you. And we believe healthy youth pastors and leaders are the number one catalyst for seeing healthy youth ministries. Again, make sure to check out HYMconference.com for more information about our national conference on October 14th and 15th. And our final prayer and encouragement to you is this: Galatians 6:9. So let us not grow tired in doing what is good, for at the right time we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. And with that, we will see you next month for another episode of the Healthy Youth Ministry podcast.